listen, never in my life associated the word boring with baseball.
We know what's up.
Me? Yeah. Famous? Yeah.
And I'm like giddy over there smiling like, we're about to win this shit.
Did everyone give you crap? Give me a good host story.
I'm not picking it up.
We both love the game.
We talk about it every day.
Get on baseball.
Having some popcorn, you're fooling around your phone.
I'd have to wait in line for 3 hours.
Hang on, because it's about to be a wild ride.
All right, there's no human being I'd rather have on the podcast right now than Sam Dykstra. It always brings a smile to your face, doesn't it? I'm here to bring a smile to your face, Sam. You've been a busy guy.
Yeah, well, no, I was very happy when you reached out to talk about this. I remember we've done this at least a few times now after big trades and whatnot. So yeah, after yesterday's craziness and all of that is in the past, I'm really glad to talk to you, Rob.
Well, I mean, I really appreciate it. I'm not just saying that because you are my go-to guy, our go-to guy when it comes to this stuff. And I know, I don't think I texted you this time, but I know that in years past, I've texted you and said, what's the comp for this guy? And could this team have gotten this or whatever. But it's always, we get this massive amount of minor leaguers names. And we're like, okay, we think we know who it is, but all right. So let's just get right to it. Here's the first question I have for you, Sam Dykstra of MLB Pipeline. Is what minor leaguer were you the most surprised it was traded?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think the one I'm most surprised was Jake Bloss going from the Astros to the Blue Jays. A lot of people have talked about that trade. It was for Yusei Kikuchi, who is essentially a rental. Jake Bloss, one of 3 guys from the 2023 draft who have pitched in the major leagues this year already. One of them is Paul Skeens. The other one is Hurston Waldrop. And then there's Jake Bloss, who was coming out of Georgetown. I mean, nobody really expected him to be this quick a mover. The Astros had rotation openings. He kept pushing the envelope, and they allowed him to get major league starts. And you thought, okay, well, he's a part of their present. And obviously, if they're trusting him now, they're going to trust him in the future. And then they trade him for a few months of Kikuchi. I mean, I thought that was a really good deal for the Blue Jays to get somebody like that back. And for the Blue Jays, I mean, I don't feel like they're a team that should be bulking up their farm system for the long term. Vlad Jr. is still around, Bichette's still around. They could have a present in 2025. Getting somebody like Bloss, he could be a number 3, number 4 starter for them next year.
But right then and there, that showed you what the cost was going to be, right? Of the cost of the starters, but really everybody. Everybody talked about the Kikuchi deal as, wow, this is going to cost a lot if you want to get anything done. I mean, is that the way that you felt?
Yeah, I mean, that felt like it was setting the stage for the rest of the market. And yeah, there were some deals that kind of flabbergasted me a little bit, like the Tanner Scott deal. But I still think that was a pretty big overpay by the Astros. They're always in contention mode. I mean, they're sneakily like the Padres, speaking of Tanner Scott, of, hey, we're just going to push our chips in now and keep this train moving. We're not going to wait for prospects to come around. We'll trade him if it gets us a guy who can help us out. Clearly, they believe in Kikuchi. But you look at the way the trades went down. Yeah, it seems like a lot of people paid top dollar in prospects, but nobody really huge got traded. I mean, there are 2 guys on our top 100 now. They're going to drop out when we do our update. I don't expect any of these prospects who got moved to be on our next top 100.
Yeah, who was the highest one on your list that got dealt?
So the highest one who actually got dealt, I think, was Robbie Snelling, who was one of the best pitchers in the minor leagues last year.
Yeah, former home run champ in high school.
Yeah, I mean,
Irwin Derby champ. I only know that because I talked to him at the All-Star game. But go ahead. I just wanted to seem smart. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, there you go. No, that's a good bit of background. I mean, you look at how quickly he climbed last year from single A to high A to double A as essentially a teenager. This year, he's really stalled out. The stuff is backed up. He's been very hittable at double A San Antonio. And the Padres are a little bit selling low. Maybe the Marlins are buying high with Robbie Snelling. So that was an interesting one. He was the highest guy ranked on our current list, but we did a story ranking all of the prospects who got traded as if we were doing a complete refresh. And Connor Norby, who went from the Orioles to the Marlins in the Trevor Rogers deal, he was number one on our list. The Marlins also got number two on our list, Augustine Ramirez. So Miami did really well, it felt like, the last couple of weeks, at least in terms of bulking out their farm system.
So when you look at the most aggressive, there's a few different things. Like the most who did the best. I'm going to get to that in a second. But from the other perspective, who was the most aggressive? And maybe you already answered it with AJ Preller. But who was the guy when you saw the deals being done, said that guy is really, 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 really unloading and trying to help his team right now?
Yeah, I think it had to be AJ Preller. I mean, you look at some of these moves that they made, dealing guys like Dylan Lesko, Robbie Snelling. I mean, they had essentially kind of like a big four in that system. Now, two of those guys are gone, and selling Lesko, selling Snelling, both of those guys you're selling low on. You could have gotten a lot more for them if you traded them a few months ago. But still, AJ Preller's always itching to make trades, right? I mean, it seems like the guy loves doing that and loves, God bless him for it. He's trying to bulk out the major league roster if he thinks those guys are going to help, and they trust their development system to generate more top prospects. But they didn't trade Ethan Salas. They didn't trade Leonidas DeVries. But you look at the rest of the system, and I do the Padres top 30 for pipeline. It was really difficult to fill out a top 30 and backfill at a certain point because AJ Preller keeps trading them. But again, they keep developing these guys, and I'm sure they'll have somebody break out in a year or two who we'll be talking about as untouchable.
So you had mentioned Miami and Peter Bendix, and their whole thing started in early May, right? I mean, with Luis Ariz. So right. With the haul so you have, I'm going to miss some people, so you're going to have to help me. Luis Ariz, Tanner Scott, Dela Cruz. Who am I missing? Who else they deal?
Jazz Chisholm Jr.
Jazz Chisholm Jr. Yeah. So the players that they got back basically at the end of the day, what's your take on it? Like, what are these? Is this an impactful group? And obviously, that's what he's trying to do. He made it clear very early on with the Ariz trade. We're turning this whole thing. We're giving it enema. Let's go. So, what's your take on what they got back?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a more well-rounded system right now. I'm really fascinated by two guys that got, Augustine Ramirez, who I talked about before, and Davison De Los Santos. Two guys who have some of the most raw power in all of the minor leagues. De Los Santos actually leads the minor leagues in home runs with 30. He played in the Arizona system. So, he plays in some really hitter-friendly ballparks, but his exit velocity is insane. His chase rate's also insane. He was chasing out of the zone around 40% of the time. So he really needs to hone that in, but he's got a decent ceiling, and those are the guys Miami's kind of buying here. Ramirez has raw power, some questions about how he's going to stick behind the plate. He might have to be first base. De Los Santos is first base right now. They get Adam Mazer. They get Dylan Head from the Padres a few months ago. I mean, you talk about a group that just ransacked the Padres system. A lot of those guys that I liked from San Diego are now in Miami, with the exception of Salas and DeVries. So they don't necessarily have like a new number one prospect. That's still, you could debate Noble Meyer versus Thomas White for me, but those are the two guys in that conversation for Miami. But they have a more well-rounded system, and they have the system that develops winners. You look at what the Orioles used to be or what the Astros used to be years ago. It was just having multiple options. It wasn't necessarily always having that one guy with a bullet, although the Orioles have certainly had that with Rutschman, Henderson, and now Holiday. That's what the Marlins are kind of missing right now, but it is more well-rounded for sure.
So you had mentioned the Orioles, Connor Norby, that put my radar up because, this was a guy, the perception was that he was blocked, but he was really, really good.
Yeah.
What is your take on, and we all knew, like, going back to the Corbin Burns deal, okay, here we go. They're going to start peeling some of these guys off. What was your take on Mike Elias's approach to this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because you think about the pieces they have. Like, they have a Kobe Mayo, they have a Samuel Basayo. Those guys could get massive returns in trades. And at least, from the outside, it doesn't look like they pulled the trigger on those. Connor Norby is difficult to give up, but he's similar to Joey Ortiz from that Corbin Burns trade in that you could give him up and continue a pace at the farm system. Connor Norby played 138 games at AAA last year and 80 this year. I mean, the guy needed to be in the majors. He was at the time of the trade, but like clearly there wasn't a lane there for him to get starting time at second base, third base, or the outfield in Baltimore. So getting rid of him is not necessarily hurtful to the Orioles organization. He could turn into what Joey Ortiz has been this year for the Brewers and like a solid contributor for Miami. And I actually fully expect him to be that, but I don't think, given what's in the farm system right now, Baltimore's necessarily going to look back at Norby and be like, man, he's the one we should have kept.
Well, I mean, Joey Ortiz is good. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like,
totally.
and people
Right.
are Ortiz, or the Orioles are like, oh my goodness, I can't believe we. You know why? Because Jackson Holliday gets called up and hit a grand slam. It's okay, right? That's how it
Right.
works. So when you look at the overall landscape of it, you mentioned that the top guys, the top of the top, they didn't get peeled off. They didn't get traded. Most of them, like these elite guys. Did that? I mean, what was your take? I guess the only way I can ask this is what was your take on that? Because a lot of times we see, if you know, well, we all knew that if you wanted a school ball, if you wanted a crochet, we wouldn't be having this conversation. They would be peeled off, but nobody
Right.
was willing to do that. What was your take on that? What was the take on teams not doing that?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard about Frank Breslow saying today, right? I'm sure you heard this directly. It's saying they were searching for relievers, and Marcelo and Roman were coming up over and over and over again because teams were right to ask, and teams are right to not give up those pieces. It sounds like prices were just kind of astronomical. Some of these turned into more, hey, we'll give you one guy who's like kind of on the periphery of the 100, and we'll bulk it out a little bit instead of giving you one prime prospect. I don't know if that's prospect hugging so much as it's just teams were willing to take bulk and betting on their development systems to turn 3 or 4 pieces into one really good one on their own. I don't know. I think that might have an effect on this, but
yeah, I mean, I think Sam, part of it is that it wasn't the players to do it. I mean, I mentioned school.
There's that too, for sure.
It's well, if you're really going to make Vlad Guerrero Jr. available, sure. But I think that the vast majority of the guys that you would classify as elite guys with control that you would give up weren't really available. I mean, it was a joke, this going back to last year, Sam, Dylan Cease, from all accounts, the asking price was stupid. And then you get to the next year, it becomes a little less stupid and it gets traded. But I just didn't feel like there was a realistic trades to be made there.
Well, and part of that too is Crochet kind of killing the leverage of the White Sox, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it all seemed like he was definitely going to go, and you probably would have seen a top 50 prospect go in a deal like that. But when he says, I'm not pitching in the postseason unless you sign me to extension, which, that's the way it goes. He's thrown a lot of innings this year. He's had a history of injuries. A lot of teams aren't going to be willing to give up that level of prospect, and the White Sox can keep asking, or they can just hold on to Garrett Crochet and hope he builds on this next year, or maybe we have the same conversation in the offseason.
One of the things I love that Greg Breslow did, and Dave Dombrowski does and has always done, which is, listen, I identify a guy, I want that guy, you want to keep asking for minor leaguers, sure. I don't care. The guy isn't going to play for us, and if he is, it's going to be ineffectual. And, like you look at Luis Garcia, you gave up 4 guys for him. 4 guys
Right.
for a 37-year-old guy in the last year of his contract. But I have zero problem with that, because I think that what drives me nuts is this dynamic of a lot of the GMs now who are on the other side of that, where they cover their ass, where they're like, we're going to get our 4 or 5 guys and maybe a one will hit, instead of really identifying. You know what I'm saying? So I like that approach.
I mean, look, it's tough to argue with Dave Dombrowski, right? He keeps doing this, and then he keeps getting his team to either a World Series or the brink of the World Series, like the Phillies last year. I mean, that deal with George Klassen. George Klassen is somebody I've continually pointed to people as being like, he is the breakout prospect of the year. Coming out of Minnesota, had severe control issues, got into that Phillies pitching pipeline. They made him into somebody who can clearly be a starter. He'll touch triple digits. He's got a couple other really good pitches. they developed him to the point where like other teams wanted him in deal. And then when they were like, all right, we're going to go get a legit closer out there in Estevez. You want Klassen? Sure. That's fine. Like he's still several steps away. He's in high A right now. He's not reached double A yet. Those control concerns aren't that far in the distant past. It's a good job by Dombrowski to be like, hey, listen, this is going to pay. And a lot of people think it's going to hurt. But hey, if I get another World Series, that's probably my seal on Cooperstown.
Yes, but again, like I think that there's a lot of GMs who take the opposite view, which is I'm going to get a lot of guys, and I'm not talking about a Bendix. That's fine. Like you've got to build things up. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about guys who are like, well, we couldn't get that deal done because they asked for Nico Cavadas. It's like, it's no, we love Nico, but it's like. It just like I between the Danny Jansen trade where you give up 3 guys and the Garcia trade where you give up 4, okay, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, I don't know. I'm just
and honestly, like I don't think about the Red Sox system as any worse today than I did last week. To be honest with you, like they traded away some decent names in there, gave up more for Danny Jansen than I would have expected for a guy who's essentially a rental for a few months, but Christian Campbell's still around. David Sandlin's still around. The big 3 is still around. Like Miguel Bleis is still around. Like the top of the Red Sox system is still very much intact, and that train keeps chugging.
Well, okay, that leads me to a very unique trade, the trade deadline, the Priester for York trade. And it was really interesting because in case people don't know, it was 2 first rounders, Quinn Priester, who was a first rounder in 2019, Nick York, who was a first rounder in 2020. Both guys had some success in the minor leagues. Priester got a taste of the major leagues, did not do well, probably devalued him a little bit. But I think in both cases they're like, well, we can get by without either one of these. But I am fascinated to see what you think about that deal.
I thought that was an awesome trade in many ways because you're getting Nick York after he wasn't that good at Portland to begin the year, and they kind of moved him up to Worcester just to challenge him, and he responded really well at Worcester. I mean, you look at the numbers across the board and you look at the underlying data, he's hitting for power, he's hitting for average. He's doing the things of Nick York that we thought 2 years ago instead of when he dipped a little bit in 2023 and then to start 2024. He's a little positionless to me still. I know he plays second base. The Pirates, from what I've heard from others, think he plays a pretty good outfield. They might even try him some in center.
Oh, really? I don't see that. Yeah,
that's a stretch for me, but like they can try him there in AAA. It doesn't hurt to do that. I don't think it's going to work, but they can try it. So the Red Sox are essentially trading him while he's on the upswing. Priester's kind of on the downswing. He was on the top 100 list, like you said. Has been really good at Indianapolis this year, but hasn't missed bats in the majors. But he's such a good opportunity for Breslow and Andrew Bailey to be like, hey, listen, you're a sinker guy. We're going to get rid of your 4-seamer. I guarantee that's going to happen. They're just not going to let him throw that anymore. Yeah. And they're going to find exactly what pitches work for him and just say, hey, spam the heck out of those. Because the raw ingredients are still there for Quinn Priester. He's still young. I'm really interested to see what happens when he gets into that pipeline instead of what he was doing in Pittsburgh.
It's funny because I was on a Pittsburgh radio station after that trade was made, and they were asking me about Nick York, and it's a tricky one, man. Like I think that because he was so good in Worcester, he was so good at AAA after being okay in AA. But I said, listen, I think that you're getting a player who will be in the major leagues. I think he will, the upside of him, he's an offensive first player. And when we say offensive first, I'm talking about the cliche 15 to 18 home runs and 280 batting average. And not super athletic. When you say center field, I'm like, I can't imagine that. But like not super athletic, but probably can play second base. But a major leaguer, like that, a major leaguer. And I don't know if I gave that description, if I heard myself give that description a year ago, I'd be like, oh, you're full of crap. But I did my best, Sam, is what I'm telling you.
Yeah, no, I mean, like that's what it looks like for Nick York, right? Like he's proven himself at the minors highest level. He should be getting at least major league looks. And that's been the scouting report ever since the Red Sox drafted him. He was a surprise first rounder I don't know if you remember that draft
Oh
night, but
yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
people
To
were like,
save money for Blaze Jordan. Yeah, of course.
yeah. And everybody was looking around and be like, this guy from California, really? Who's like only a second baseman? You're going to do that? And then he hit like everybody expected. And it's been kind of back and forth ever since. I do think he's a major leaguer, but I kind of think Priester has a higher ceiling now that he's hooking up with Breslow and Bailey.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I mean, there you go.
I mean, context is key. That's the whole
Yeah.
part of this. If you were trading those two guys to like, I don't know, pick two other random teams out of a hat, I'd be like, okay, maybe I usually like the bat more because they get everyday potential. But I think getting Priester with those two guys is really going to bring out the best in him.
Okay, in synopsis, Sam Dykstra, you look back at this trade deadline, and once again, excellent job. I hope you get some rest. Much like the GMs, you exhausted yourself to the point of keeling over, and now this is your time to reflect. What will you look back at this trade deadline? What will Sam Dykstra look back and say, 20 years from now, hey kids, this was a 2024 trade deadline?
It'll be interesting. I don't know if I'm going to have a big memory of it in 20 years because I don't think there's anybody here with that big ceiling. It's not like the Juan Soto deadline of 2 years ago. I'll be talking about that until I'm, retired.
Yeah.
But I think I'll probably just remember this as the one that happened in bulk. There are a lot of teams out there buying, not many teams out there selling. The Rays, the Marlins doing pretty well, bringing in the Blue Jays, bringing in bulk. And now it's on them to develop these guys. They brought in huge swaths of additions to their top 30s, but like that looks good on paper for now. What is it going to look like in 3-4 years from now? I think that'll be how this deadline will be defined more than anything, at least from my perspective. Not from
Yeah.
you.
No, listen, everyone that's put it on the bumper stickers. 2024 trade deadline. It was all about bulk.
It was all about bulk.
But we hear the same narrative. I think it was different from last year in the sense of I felt like there was more deals done. Like we always do the trade deadline show leading up to it, hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes, and nothing happens. This time stuff was happening. Like stuff was happening. But at the same time, you hear after like the same narrative a year before where prices were just outrageous, asks were just outrageous. And we know now also it has become a seller's market because basically there's more teams in it. But I guess what I'm saying is was this comparable in your eyes in terms of how difficult it was to do trade? Is this just our lot in life at the trade deadline now because so many teams are in it?
I think it could be. Yeah. I mean, I think there's just so many teams that should be going for it. If you like, I don't think the Rays necessarily should have been a complete strip down team just based off their record this year. But they're Tampa Bay, right? This is what they do. If guys are getting close to arbitration, they're getting close to being expensive. They will trade them to bulk up their farm system again and develop those guys into good major leaguers. But yeah, I think if you're a team that's willing to sell moving forward, there's going to be 4, 5, 6 of those, and there's going to be 20 teams with actual contention hopes, and that's going to maybe drive up prices. But if teams are going to treat those prices by adding prospects, like you said, instead of increasing the level of prospect, this might just be how things are going to go from here on out.
I lied because you mentioned the Rays and I did not do a good job of asking. Like we talked about the Marlins. What was your take on the Rays?
Yeah, the Rays. I mean, their system is so much deeper now than it was. That used to be the trademark of the Rays, is that they would have, a one really good prospect, and they have that now in Junior Caminero, and then just a really deep farm. And the Rays is another farm system that I do the top 30 for. And I'll be honest with you, right now I'm at like 45 names deep after all the trades they made of like guys I would rank in other top 30s. And plus they have a really good top of the group: Junior Caminero, Xavier Isaac, Carson Williams, Braden Taylor. I really like Gary Gill-Hill. Chandler Simpson leads the world in stolen bases. They are a more dynamic farm system now than they were. I think this was them being opportunistic. I'm a little surprised, they traded Isak Paredes. I'm a little surprised they still kept Yandy Diaz. Maybe the deal wasn't out there for them to pull the trigger on that. If they were going to go in for a penny, go in for a pound type situation.
Yeah.
But they had a lot of interesting names right at the top with Dylan Lesko. If they can get that guy to show better command,
Well, I
than
was
he
gonna
has for the
say,
last
is
2
that the
years.
guy?
He's,
I mean,
he's an ace.
I was gonna ask, yeah, I was gonna ask you, like, who was the guy you're most excited to get back, but Lesko is probably it, right?
Yeah, I mean, let's go. Is it? I like the two guys they got back, Brady Hopkins and Aiden Smith from the Mariners and the Rosarena trade too. I think getting Hopkins when they did that, he used to be a two-way player in college. This is really the only time he's focused on pitching, and he really took off in the Mariners system. I think the Rays could really take that baton and run with it. Let's go is a complete reclamation project, but the raw pieces are still there. He'll throw in the mid 90s. His changeup is still a plus pitch. He just needs to be able to work better on the edges of the zone instead of either completely out of the zone or right dead center.
All right. Well, lower your heart rate. You good? You good? All good?
I mean, we have re-rank coming up, so I will sleep in September,
I would
but
sleep in
I'll get there
September.
eventually.
Let it be said, let it be done. Sam Dykstra, I will sleep in September. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your expertise, your education, and your analysis, and most importantly, your entertainment. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.